Smelled it before I saw it. Not just any perfume, hers. Sweet, floral, expensive. The kind of scent you only wear when you're trying to be unforgettable. It clung to Victor's white dress shirt like an accusation, a whisper of another woman pressed too close to my husband's skin. I stood in the laundry room, fingers tightening around the fabric until my knuckles whitened. It wasn't the first time I had suspected, but it was the first time I had proof. "Late night at the office," he had said last night. The client dinner ran long. And like the good wife I had been for 10 years, I smiled, nodded, and kept dinner warm until midnight. I swallowed my disappointment, my suspicion, my anger. Because that's what you do when you love someone, isn't it? You believe them. But I didn't believe him anymore. The house was too quiet. Our son, Michael, was at his grandmother's for the weekend, which meant I had no one to distract me from the thoughts screaming in my head. I held Victor's shirt to my nose again, as if daring myself to be wrong. I wasn't. I folded the shirt neatly and set it on the counter. No shouting. No tears. Not yet. I learned a long time ago that rage was useless unless you sharpened it into a weapon first. The calm before the storm. Victor came home earlier than usual that night. His smile was easy, casual. Too casual, and when he kissed my cheek I almost flinched. "Smells good in here," he said, tossing his briefcase by the door. "What's for dinner?" "Roast chicken," I said softly, forcing a smile. "Your favorite." His eyes lit up like I was the best wife in the world, and I hated him for it. Hated how easily he played his role. As we sat at the table I watched him. Every move, every blink, every shift in his chair. He laughed at something on his phone, and I smiled back as if nothing inside me was burning. "Everything okay?" he asked suddenly, catching me staring. "Yes," I lied. "Everything's fine." But I wasn't fine. I was calculating. The first crack. Later that night, while he showered, I slipped into his office. It wasn't snooping, not really, just confirming. His phone was on the desk, unguarded. A small part of me hoped it would be empty, that I'd find nothing and could crawl back into the comfortable lie of our marriage. But the screen lit up with a message that froze my blood. "Same time tomorrow." I can't stop thinking about last night. I didn't recognize the number. No name saved. Just 7 digits and a promise of betrayal. My hand shook as I scrolled. Dozens of messages. Weeks of them. Flirtations, confessions, secret plans. I felt something inside me crack, but no tears came. Not one. Instead, I took screenshots of everything. I emailed them to myself. Evidence. Then I put the phone back exactly where I found it, smoothed the papers on his desk, and went to bed, smiling when he climbed in beside me. Plan forms. The next morning I woke before him. I made coffee, packed his lunch, kissed him goodbye like a good wife. And the moment the door shut, I sat at the table and began to plan. Murder doesn't just happen. It requires precision, patience, creativity. And it requires time. I didn't want to kill him, not yet. That would be too easy. No, I wanted him to feel it. I wanted him to feel every ounce of pain, confusion, and fear that I had swallowed down over the years. I wanted to strip him bare, piece by piece, until he had nothing left but the truth. So I waited. I gathered more evidence. Bank statements, credit card receipts, hotel bookings. I built my case like a lawyer preparing for trial. And all the while I smiled at him, kissed him, made love to him. Because the best revenge is the one they never see coming. The stranger. It was on a Wednesday afternoon that I followed him. He told me he had a late meeting again. I kissed him goodbye, waited 20 minutes, and then grabbed my keys. He drove downtown, not to the office but to a hotel, one of those boutique places with gold trim and velvet curtains. I parked across the street and watched him disappear inside. 10 minutes later she appeared. She was younger than me. Prettier maybe. Her hair was long, her heels too high for a casual meeting. She looked like everything I used to be before 10 years of marriage dulled my shine. I hated her instantly, and I memorized her face. The hook tightens. When Victor came home that night, he was glowing, happy. He kissed me, held me a little longer than usual, as if guilt made him tender. I kissed him back, tasting the ghost of her perfume on his lips. Then, when he went upstairs to shower, I called the number from his phone. She answered on the second ring. Hello. I didn't speak, just listened. Victor, she said softly, almost shyly. I smiled, a cold, sharp smile that felt like the first real thing I'd done in weeks, and hung up. The quiet before blood. That night I dreamed of blood. Not his, not yet, but hers. And when I woke up, I knew exactly how this story was going to end. The morning after my dream, I woke with a strange calm, as if something inside me had finally clicked into place. It wasn't rage that drove me anymore. Rage is messy, loud, impulsive. What I felt now was colder, cleaner. Quiet purpose. I made Victor breakfast, kissed his cheek, and sent him off like the perfect wife. The moment the door shut, I dialed her number again. This time I spoke. Stay away from my husband. There was silence, then a soft, incredulous laugh. Who is this? You know exactly who I am. Was. Then she sighed. Look, lady, I think you have the wrong idea. I've seen you, I cut her off. I know where you meet. I know what room you book. Silence again, heavier this time. Good, I said finally, my voice calm and deliberate. Then you know I'm serious. If you value your pretty little face, stay away from him. I hung up before she could reply, my pulse steady, my hands dry. No trembling this time. Victor notices the shift. That night, Victor studied me over dinner. You seem different, he said, frowning slightly. Do I? I smiled sweetly. Maybe I'm just happy. We haven't had much time together lately." His guilt made him softer with me over the next few days. Flowers appeared on the table. He cooked once badly, but I praised him anyway. He took me to dinner Friday night, holding my hand as if we were newlyweds. But I could see it in his eyes. The pull was still there. He was thinking about her. The texts hadn't stopped. If anything, they had become more frantic, desperate. She was pushing him to choose. And I was going to make sure he did. First move. On Saturday, I pretended to leave for a friend's house. Instead, I parked 2 blocks away and waited. An hour later, I saw her car pull up in front of my house. She hesitated at the door, then rang the bell. Victor answered. I couldn't hear what they said, but I could see her gesturing, see his hands on his hips, his face hard. He didn't let her inside. But she didn't look scared either. If anything, she looked angry. When she left, I followed her. She drove to a small cafe and sat alone for nearly an hour, staring out the window. I watched from my car, wondering what she was thinking, whether she was planning to fight for him. She was brave, I'd give her that. But bravery wasn't going to save her. The trap is set. Over the next 2 weeks, I built my trap carefully. I started with Victor. I made him feel safe, adored, forgiven. I became the woman he had fallen in love with, laughing at his jokes, cooking his favorite meals, even buying a new dress that I knew would catch his eye. And it worked. He stayed home more, lingered in bed, touched me like he used to. But I knew it wouldn't last. Cheaters don't stop because they're happy. They stop because they're afraid. So I turned my attention to her. I left small gifts on her car. A single white rose. Photo of Victor and me with Michael. A note that said, he's mine. No threats. No name. Just enough to unnerve her. Then I waited. The confrontation. It happened on a Thursday night. Victor was working late again, and I knew exactly where he was. I drove to the hotel, my heart steady, my mind clear. I didn't knock this time. I used the spare key card I'd lifted from Victor's wallet days ago. The look on their faces when I opened the door was almost worth everything. Victor jumped to his feet, guilt flashing across his face. She froze, wide-eyed, clutching the bedsheet like a child caught stealing candy. "Rachel," Victor started, but I held up a hand. "Don't," I said softly. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just looked at her. "You should have stayed away," I said. Then I turned and left. The storm breaks. Victor came home late that night. He tried to explain, to apologize, but I barely listened. "This can't happen again," I said finally. "It won't," he promised. But I knew it would. Because promises mean nothing to a man who has already broken every vow he ever made. And now, the only vow that mattered was mine. Blood in the future. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the knife block. The plan was ready. All I had to do now was wait for the perfect moment. The moment when he thought everything was back to normal. Because when I finally struck, there would be no warning, no mercy, no forgiveness. The human mind is a cruel thing. I discovered that over the next few weeks as I watched Victor, smiled at him, touched him, kissed him, all while counting down the days until I'd end everything. I didn't rush. Revenge is sweeter when it's slow. I cooked him perfect dinners. I left love notes in his briefcase. I became his dream wife again, and he started to relax. His guard dropped. He even cancelled a few hotel meetings, or so he claimed. But his phone betrayed him again, glowing late at night when he thought I was asleep. I didn't confront him. Not this time. Because I needed him to keep meeting her. The perfect moment. The idea came to me one rainy afternoon as I sat in the kitchen, staring at the knife block. A knife would be messy, too obvious. No, I needed something quieter, cleaner. I researched poisons. There are hundreds of ways to kill someone slowly, but I wanted precision. Something that would leave him alive long enough to suffer, to wonder what was happening. Then I found it. A toxin nearly undetectable, easy to acquire if you know where to look. I placed the order online under a fake name, using a prepaid card. It arrived 2 weeks later, in an innocuous little vial no bigger than a lipstick tube. I held it in my hand, feeling the weight of it. So light for something that could end a life. The mistress fights back. Meanwhile, she didn't disappear. In fact, she got bolder. I started finding traces of her in my life. A lipstick-stained napkin tucked under my windshield wiper. A text from an unknown number that read, "He'll never love you like he loves me." Should have broken me. Instead, it sealed her fate. I decided she would die first. I waited until Victor left town for a conference, then called her. She didn't answer the first time, or the second, but on the third call she picked up. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice sharp. "To talk," I said. "About what?" "About Victor. About us. About how this ends." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Fine. Where?" "My house. Tomorrow night. 8 o'clock. She hesitated, then agreed. When I hung up, I smiled. The night of reckoning. I spent the next day preparing carefully. I cleaned the house until it gleamed. I lit candles. I poured 2 glasses of wine, lacing one of them with just enough poison to send her into a deep, irreversible sleep. When she arrived, she looked nervous but defiant. "Nice place," she said coldly, stepping inside. I gestured to the table. "Sit." She did, her eyes never leaving mine. "I'm not here to fight," I said softly. "I just need to know why." She blinked, surprised. "Why? Why him? Why you couldn't stay away?" She looked down at her wineglass, then back at me. "Because he loves me," she said simply. I smiled sadly and pushed the glass toward her. "Then drink to that," I said. She hesitated, then lifted the glass. And I watched as she took the first sip. The last words. It didn't take long. 10 minutes later, she was on the floor, gasping, her eyes wide with terror. I knelt beside her, brushing her hair back gently. "He never loved you," I whispered. "He barely loves himself." She tried to speak, but no sound came. When the light finally left her eyes, I sat back and exhaled slowly. It was done. Clean up. I had planned for everything. Gloves, plastic sheeting, bleach. By the time midnight came, the house was spotless again. Her car was parked 2 blocks away where no one would notice it for days. Her phone was at the bottom of a lake. And I was sitting on the couch, sipping wine when Victor called. "Miss me?" he teased. "Always," I said sweetly. Victor's return. When he came home the next day, I kissed him like nothing had happened. But I could see the worry in his eyes when he checked his phone and saw no messages from her. He tried to hide it, but I knew. And I smiled to myself because the game had only just begun. Victor changed after she disappeared. At first, it was subtle. A tension in his shoulders, a distracted look in his eyes. He stayed up late scrolling through his phone, waiting for messages that never came. Then came the panic. He started calling her, leaving voicemails, driving by the places they used to meet. "She's not answering me," he said one night, his voice tight. "Maybe she's done with you," I said, sipping my wine. He looked at me sharply. "What do you mean?" Shrugged. "Maybe she realized you weren't going to leave me. Maybe she moved on." He didn't say anything, but I saw the fear in his face. The lies spiral. Over the next few weeks, Victor grew more erratic. He stopped eating. He lost weight. He started drinking more. Once, I caught him staring at me across the dinner table, as if he were trying to read my thoughts. "Are you happy, Rachel?" he asked suddenly. "Yes," I said with a small smile. "Happier than I've been in years." He didn't smile back. The psychological game. I began to leave little reminders for him. A lipstick smear on his shirt collar that wasn't mine, a hotel receipt tucked into his wallet, a stranger's earring under his pillow. Every time he looked more shaken. "Rachel, I swear I didn't." "I know," I said softly, brushing his cheek with my fingers. "You would never." The doubt ate at him. Soon he was jumping at shadows, double-checking locks, pacing the house at night. And every time he broke down, I was there, soothing him, holding him, making him believe that I was the only safe thing left in his world. The breaking point. It all came to a head one stormy night. Victor sat at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. "She's gone," he said hoarsely. "Nobody's seen her. Nobody knows where she is. What if something happened to her?" I set a cup of tea in front of him. "Then you should pray for her," I said gently. He looked up at me, his eyes wild. "Rachel, I think I'm going crazy." Smiled. "No, darling. You're finally seeing clearly. The final decision." That night, I stood over him as he slept, watching the rise and fall of his chest. The man I had loved for a decade was already gone. What lay beside me was a stranger, weak, broken, hollow. And I realized that I wasn't just going to kill him. I was going to free myself. Preparing the end. The next few days were a blur of preparation. I cleaned the house again, top to bottom. I wrote letters, one to Michael, explaining that I loved him more than anything, and one to the police, framing Victor's death as a tragic accident. I set the date for Friday night. The night arrives. Victor came home late that evening, soaked from the rain. "Bad day?" I asked, handing him a towel. "The worst," he said with a hollow laugh. I poured him a drink, his favorite whiskey, and laced it with the same poison I had used on her, but a higher dose. He drank it in one swallow, barely tasting it. Then he looked at me, his expression almost childlike. "Do you still love me?" he asked. I leaned down and kissed him softly. "Yes," I whispered. And then I watched as he began to fade. A slow death. Took longer than I expected. He staggered, clutching his throat, his eyes wide with terror. "Rachel, I'm here," I said softly, holding his hand as he collapsed to the floor. He tried to speak again, but no words came. I smoothed his hair back, just as I had done for her. "This is mercy," I whispered. "This is justice." When it was over, I sat on the floor beside him for a long time, listening to the rain pound against the windows. And for the first time in months I felt peace. The house was so quiet after Victor died that it felt like a cathedral. Even the rain had stopped, as if the world was holding its breath. I sat on the kitchen floor for an hour before I moved. When I finally stood, my body felt light, almost weightless. It was done. I cleaned everything methodically. The glass, the counter, the floor where he had fallen. When I was satisfied, I called the police. The perfect performance. "Please," I said into the phone, letting my voice shake. "My husband, I think he's dead." The police arrived within minutes. I played my role flawlessly. The grieving wife, the woman who had tried to save him, who had found him too late. The coroner said it looked like a heart attack. And just like that, Victor's death was ruled natural. No suspicion. No investigation. It was almost disappointingly easy. The funeral. At the funeral, I cried on cue. I held Michael close, whispering that his father had loved him very much. I accepted condolences from neighbors and friends, from business associates who spoke of Victor as if he had been a saint. And all the while I smiled inside. Because no one, not one single person, knew the truth. The mistress's shadow. Weeks passed, and life returned to a new kind of normal. But sometimes late at night I thought of her. I imagined her lying at the bottom of that lake, her bones turning white in the dark water. I imagined her ghost standing in the corner of my bedroom, watching me sleep. And I wondered if she was laughing. The twist of fate. One afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. Me standing at the window of my kitchen the night she died, the curtains open, her car clearly visible in the driveway. On the back, a single line. "I know what you did." The new fear. For the first time in months, my heart raced. Who had taken this? Who had been watching me? And what did they want? The ending no one saw coming. That night, as I tucked Michael into bed, I kissed his forehead and lingered a moment too long. Because I knew something now. Something I hadn't understood until that letter arrived. The game wasn't over. Had only changed players. And somewhere out there, someone was waiting for me to make my next move. I went downstairs, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat in the dark. A smile crept across my lips. Because if they wanted a war, they were going to get one. The letter that wouldn't burn. I tried to burn it. The photograph. The words. That smug little threat on the back. I held it over the kitchen sink with a match until the paper curled and blackened. But even after the ashes swirled down the drain, I still felt it in my chest like a splinter. Someone knew. Someone had seen. And they weren't going to let me forget it. The first call. The call came 2 days later. Block number. You shouldn't drink so much wine, the voice said. Froze. Who is this? Soft chuckle. You already know. What do you want? Oh, we'll get to that, the voice said smoothly. But first, I want you to think about something. How many people have you lied to this week? Your son. Your friends. The police. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles ached. Leave me alone, I hissed. Not a chance. You owe me. And I always collect. The line went dead. The game begins. For the next week, little things started happening. A single white rose left on my porch. Victor's watch, the one I'd buried with him, placed neatly on my pillow. My son's favorite toy moved from his room to the kitchen table overnight. It was subtle, almost polite, but it was enough to keep me awake at night. Whoever this was, they weren't afraid of me. And that made them dangerous. Michael at risk. One evening, Michael came home from school clutching a folded note. Someone gave this to me, he said, confused. I unfolded it and nearly dropped it. Nice boy. Would be a shame if he lost his mother. There was no signature, just a simple drawing, a rose. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just blackmail anymore. This was war. The counterattack. Fear is a funny thing. Can paralyze you or it can sharpen you. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty wine glass in front of me, and made a decision. Whoever this watcher was, they had made one critical mistake. They thought they could scare me. But I wasn't the same woman who used to swallow betrayal with a forced smile. Whoa. I had killed twice. And I wasn't afraid to do it again. The first step. I started by buying a gun. Not for Michael's sake, though I told myself that was the reason, but for me. Because I wasn't going to wait for this ghost to corner me. I was going to hunt them first. The shadow in the dark. The very next night I saw them. A figure standing just beyond the tree line behind my house, motionless, watching. When I stepped onto the porch, they melted into the dark. But they left something behind. A single envelope, weighted with something small. Inside was a USB drive. I plugged it into my laptop and found a single video file. It showed me, in my kitchen, kneeling beside the mistress's body the night I killed her. I watched myself tuck her hair back, whisper in her ear. The video cut out just before I stood up. And then came a message in white letters across the black screen. "You'll do exactly what I say next." I shut the laptop and stared at my reflection in the dark window. This wasn't about Victor anymore. This wasn't about love or betrayal or revenge. This was about survival. And I wasn't going to lose. The next few days were a blur of paranoia. Every creak of the house felt like a footstep, every passing car a threat. I stopped sleeping. But fear makes you resourceful. I traced the USB's metadata, followed the clues hidden in the shadows of the video. And finally I found them. The watcher wasn't a stranger. It was Victor's brother, Ethan. The one who had always despised me, who had whispered once at a family dinner that Victor deserved someone younger. He had been following Victor for months, gathering evidence, waiting for the perfect moment to destroy me. But he hadn't expected me to fight back. I invited him to the house. "Let's talk," I said over the phone, calm, steady. "No more games." He came at night, smug, certain he had already won. "You killed them both," he said the moment he stepped inside. "I should take this to the police right now." "But you won't," I said, handing him a glass of wine. He frowned but drank it anyway. "Why not?" he asked. "Because you're just like him," I said softly. "And deep down you wanted this as much as I did." Took 10 minutes for the poison to work. When he collapsed, I knelt beside him, just as I had with Victor, just as I had with her. "You should have stayed out of it, Ethan," I whispered. By sunrise he was gone, just another missing man in a world full of them. I cleaned everything, erased every trace. The USB, the photos, the letters, all burned to ash. When I tucked Michael into bed that night, the house was silent again. But this time, it wasn't an empty silence. It was mine. I poured myself a final glass of wine and sat in the dark, staring out at the trees. If someone else was watching, I almost hoped they would step forward. Because I was no longer afraid. I had been a good wife. I had been a good mother. And now I was something else entirely. Someone you should never cross. Someone you should never betray.